Welcome to the Inspired Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea De La Cerda, and each week I'm bringing you the latest discussions and news about changes in the landscape of education and entrepreneurship. As a 22-year entrepreneur, corporate executive, business coach, and leader, I mentor a community of change-making men and women to get out of their box and step into their true calling to make the biggest impact on this world. This podcast is all about empowering us all, navigating life's twists and turns, and stepping into the fullest version of who we're meant to be. Whose life are you living? It's a simple question, but for many of us, it's surprisingly difficult to answer honestly, because somewhere along the way, many women become experts at taking care of everyone else's dreams, right? Everyone else's comfort, everyone's expectations of us, and everyone else's success becomes our own. Until one day we wake up and realize that, whoa, we've become a supporting character in our own lives. Today's episode is about changing that, not by becoming selfish and not by abandoning the people that we love at all, but by reclaiming something many of us surrendered long ago, the right to author our own story. Thank you for joining me on this week's episode of the Inspired Podcast. Let's get into it. I want you to imagine walking into a bookstore. You find a novel with your name on the cover. You're excited, so you open it up and you begin reading. Page after page, you discover something potentially unsettling. You're in the story, but you aren't making the decisions in the story. Other people are. Your parents decide what success means for you in your life. Your church decides on what is acceptable. Your partner decides how much space you're allowed to take up. Your employer determines your worth. Your friends shape your priorities. And society tells you what a good woman should do. So you appear in every chapter, but somehow everyone else seems to be writing the plot of your own life. How long would you keep reading that book before asking, when do I get the pen? I think that's one of the defining questions of adulthood, at least it's been for me. Not who am I, but who's writing my life? When I look back at my own life, I don't think anyone intentionally handed me someone else's script. I think it just happened gradually, right? Growing up in a conservative religious environment, there was already a storyline waiting for me. What a good daughter looked like, what a good Christian woman looked like, what a successful woman looked like. And then marriage introduced a whole other script. Be supportive, keep the peace. Don't make others around you feel uncomfortable. Question yourself before you question someone else's opinion. Corporate leadership then introduced a whole other set of scripts. Work harder, be indispensable, earn your seat at the table. Never let them see weakness. And individually, none of these roles were entirely wrong. But over time, I realized that I had become incredibly good at playing each of these individual parts. I wasn't sure who I was when the performance ended. When burnout hit in 2022, it wasn't simply because I was working too much. It was because I had spent decades living according to scripts that I had inherited instead of intentionally writing my own. Leaving corporate wasn't just a career decision. It was the first chapter that I consciously wrote for myself. And that realization changed my life. If you're listening and thinking, that's exactly how I feel, you are not alone, especially if you're a woman. For generations, we've been socialized to become caregivers before becoming self-knowers. Research from psychologist Carol Gilligan has shown that many women are taught to define themselves through relationships and responsibility before they're encouraged to develop an independent sense of identity. Developmental psychologists describe this as identity formation, a process that can be interrupted when external expectations consistently outweigh internal values. Sociologist Arlie Hochschild's work on emotional labor revealed another layer, that women often carry invisible responsibilities that extend far beyond job descriptions. Managing emotions, maintaining harmony, remembering everybody's birthdays, supporting coworkers, holding families together emotionally. These aren't inherently negative acts, though. But when they become someone's entire identity, something important can get lost. The person underneath the role. This isn't just about women either. And men also sometimes grow up inside these rigid scripts as well. They are placed as in that position of the provider, the protector, the stoic leader, the man who never asks for help and never shows emotion. Different expectations for them, perhaps, but the same challenge. living according to inherited roles instead of conscious choice. Here's the interesting part. Most of us don't intentionally surrender authorship. We just trade it. We trade it for approval. We trade it for belonging, for certainty, for safety, because we, human beings, are wired innately for connection. Psychologist Abraham Maslow taught us that belonging is one of our most fundamental needs. From an evolutionary perspective, acceptance by the group increased our chances of survival. So our brains become incredibly skilled at adapting to that. The problem is that adaptation can slowly become self-abandonment. The very strategies that helped us belong as children may quietly prevent us from becoming ourselves as adults. And one reason this theme appears in nearly every great story is that it reflects something deeply human. Joseph Campbell called it the hero's journey. An ordinary person receives a call to leave the familiar. At first, they resist. They doubt themselves. They fear disappointing others. And then finally, they step into uncertainty. Of course, they face challenges. They meet mentors along the way. They lose their old identities and eventually return transformed. Think about Luke Skywalker, Elizabeth Bennet, Harry Potter, Moana, Katniss Everdeen. None of them become heroes because life is easy. They become heroes because they stop allowing fear to determine the story. Your life follows in a similar pattern. The question is whether you'll answer the call or keep waiting for someone else to give you permission. Oprah Winfrey refused to let early poverty, abuse, and repeated professional setbacks define the rest of her story. J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter while navigating financial hardship as a single mother. Her manuscript was rejected multiple times before it was accepted. Viola Davis has spoken openly about growing up in poverty and feeling unseen before becoming one of the most respected actors of her generation. And Sarah Blakely didn't wait until she felt fearless to pitch Spanx. She embraced rejection as part of the process because she had learned that temporary failure didn't define her identity. Different industries, different backgrounds, and the common thread wasn't talent alone. It was authorship. They stopped allowing circumstances to dictate the ending of the story. One of the greatest privileges of the work that I am doing is just witnessing the moment when someone realizes that they've been living according to someone else's definition of success. I've seen executives discover that they wanted to start nonprofits. I've seen nonprofit leaders realize that they'd been shrinking their vision because they feared asking for larger gifts. I've worked with entrepreneurs who spent years building businesses they secretly disliked because they thought that was what success was supposed to look like. And almost never does the breakthrough begin with strategy at all. It simply begins with permission to imagine a different story, permission to disappoint people along the way, permission to change, permission to become, to evolve. And that's when everything starts to shift. Here are 5 signs you may be a supporting character in your own life. First, you make decisions based primarily on how other people will react. Second, you struggle to answer the question, what do I actually want? Third, you feel guilty whenever you prioritize yourself. 4, you've achieved goals that no longer bring you joy. And 5, you keep waiting for permission that no one else can give. And if any of these resonate, please don't judge yourself. Just notice them. Awareness is the beginning of authorship. But taking back the pen doesn't mean rewriting your entire life overnight either. It simply begins with small, courageous decisions. Tell the truth. Set one boundary. Say no to something that no longer aligns. And say yes to something that does. Choose curiosity over obligation. And then ask yourself each morning, if I were consciously writing today's chapter, what would I include? Not next year, but today. Because lives are not rewritten in one dramatic moment. They're rewritten one decision at a time. This week, I'd love for you to spend a few minutes journaling. Things like, who handed me the scripts that I've been living? Which of those scripts still serve me? Which ones have expired? Where am I waiting for permission? If I believed my life was meant to express who I truly am, what chapter would I begin writing today? And perhaps the most important question of all, when my grandchildren or someone I mentored decades from now tell my story, what do I hope they'll say I was courageous enough to change? When I think about my own life now, I don't regret the chapters that I didn't write. Those chapters actually shaped me. They taught me something. They revealed to me what mattered to me, but I'm deeply grateful that eventually I did pick up the pen. Because here's what happened. I learned that you cannot rewrite yesterday's chapters, but you absolutely can decide who writes the next one. And maybe that's what becoming the main character really means. Not demanding all the attention, not believing the world revolves around you in any sense, but refusing to let fear, expectations, other people's opinions become the author of your future. Your story deserves your voice. Your dreams deserve your courage, and your life deserves to reflect the person you were created to become. Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Inspired Podcast. If today's conversation resonated with you at all, please share it with someone who has spent so much of their life supporting everyone else that they've forgotten they're allowed to become the author of their own. And if you want to learn more about my Inspired Rewrite coaching program to rewrite your life for the greatest opportunity for freedom and success on your terms, look for the links in the show notes and we'll talk. Until next time, remember this: no one else can write the life you were given. The pen has always been in your hands. It's time to use it. Take care. Thanks for joining me on today's episode. If you'd like to explore what your life could look like when your business and life are aligned with what you're really meant to do, get a business audit. I'll personally review your business, look at your social accounts, and give you some precise direction on what's working and how to create even more impact and income. Simply go to andreadelacerda.com, navigate to work with me, and select the business audit. Again, that's andreadelacerda.com, work with me, and then select the business audit. And if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe. That way more content like this can be shared with you as soon as new episodes drop. Thanks so much for joining again. See you soon. Take care.